Good day, Internet. This is Chavez and Valko, the key to your immigration solutions. I am Senior Associate Benjamin Hamilton, and you know that when you see me, we are here to talk about all things employment based immigration. And today we're going to talk about a topic that I see come up all the time on the internet, whether it be Reddit, Twitter, or wherever. And that is the question of side hustles, right? Basically, what other ways can I earn income if I'm here in the United States on a work visa, whether it be H-1B, TNL, right? Whatever it may be. You see this come up all the time, right? People propose things such as Airbnb, Uber, Turo, YouTube, OnlyFans, like crypto, Robinhood, Upwork, Fiverr, you name it, right? Another common one we tend to see pop up is people asking about, well, what if I'm like doing a side hustle, but it's like contract work for a foreign employer, right? That foreign employer is paying me in my home into my bank account in my home country. It's not even coming into the U.S., right? And then the third question we tend to see is about spouses, right? So it's, oh, my spouse has a job here in our home country. I got an H-1B. She got an H-4. She's coming to the U.S. Can she keep working for her foreign employer, even though she's going to be living in the United States? So again, we have these U.S.-based side hustles, foreign-based side hustles, and then spouses. Very common questions that you just see coming up again and again and again and again, right? And so wanted to do a little video to try to address this issue. So my answer to most of these questions, honestly, is going to be no. All right. In general, it's going to be no. And why? Well, because when Congress passes a law, they tend to like put in things that are pretty broad. Then they leave it up to the agency to try to work out the details, right? So the term employment is pretty broadly defined in U.S. immigration law. This is what it says: the term employment means any service or labor performed by an employee for an employer within the United States, right? So any service or labor for an employer, and it doesn't say U.S. employer or foreign employer, it just says for an employer within the United States, right? And then the word employment is also defined as meaning the act of being employed for one's self. So it also includes self-employment. So also when it comes to the compensation, right, it's not just salary. They've taken a very broad-based definition to include almost any remuneration, any type of compensation. Um, Although there is one exception here that's a little bit interesting. I'll read this to you and you can probably figure out what it is. However, employment does not include casual employment by individuals who provide domestic service in a private home that is sporadic, irregular, or intermittent. What does that basically mean? Babysitting's okay, right? Not as a full-time job because it says sporadic, irregular, intermittent. But hey, if you occasionally babysit, I mean, my daughter's 15 and she babysits, but hey, if you're you're on an H-1B visa and want to babysit on a weekend for a friend and they actually pay you for it, I guess that one's technically allowed. We made a carve out for it. Um, Also, the other thing that's really important, right, is the place where the money comes from is not relevant, right? So here's another thing I wanted to read really quick. Um, the need for U.S. employment authorization is driven by the nature of the activities to be performed in the United States, even if the source of the income is foreign, because the question of where the beneficiary's paycheck may originate is not a relevant factor in determining the beneficiary's eligibility for a non-immigrant classification sought in the petition. Ugh. So what does this really all this mean? Is that if I am, let's say, working for Uber, right? Well, I am working in the US. I mean, you can say whether it as an employee or you can say it as self-employed, right? But you are working in the United States, receiving compensation, you need work authorization, right? And it likewise applies to if I'm in the US, hey, I got my H-1B from my US based employer, but hey, I'm doing like independent contractor work for this employer in um in my home country. Well, guess what? Are you in the US? Yes. Are you doing work for pay? Yes, you actually need work authorization for that. You cannot work for that foreign employer. Um, Again, I think that's kind of a dumb way to look at it. Like, hey, even though I'm physically here, if I'm fulfilling the terms of my H-1B, but also doing the side gig for a foreign employer, I think you should probably be allowed to do it. But hey, that's just the way the law is written. Um, so, what is allowed, right? What can you do? One of the things we look at is what can you do as a tourist, right? Because that's fairly well defined, right? And so it's kind of like, well, if I can do it as a tourist, I can probably do it, if I'm in like an H-1B or dependent status, right? So these are things that are like, well, engage in commercial transactions, right? Specifically, this is like if I'm selling on behalf of a foreign company for products manufactured abroad, right? Um, that would be a little bit tricky to try to make that argument if you were like the principal H-1B, but I can see this for like a spouse, like on an H-4 or a TD, saying, well, no, I work for a foreign employer. Um, and that I'm, doing some sales for that foreign employer for goods that are manufactured abroad. Um, Also, as a tourist, you can come in to negotiate contracts. You can consult with business associations. You can come in for purposes of litigation. You can participate in scientific, educational, professional, business conventions, conferences, right? Um, you can participate in training as long as it obviously is not employment. You can also enter as an investor seeking an investment, right? So we a lot of times talk about investor visas. Well, how do I do that without having the actual work visa? Well, it's because you're actually allowed to come in and sort of set everything up. You just can't manage the company, but you are allowed to come in and set it up. And there are some additional caveats based in NAFTA, which is now the USMCA for Mexican or Canadian nationals. So, if we're going to talk about really what it is you can or can't do, the main thing that we're looking at is it passive income, right? Because we know it's any service or labor performed by an employee for an employer. So service or labor. So the idea being is the things that I can do are the things that I can classify as passive income. So is Uber passive income? No. But what about Turo? What if I own a car and I rent my car out? You can probably classify that as passive income, right? But then what about if you turn around, you buy 3 or 4 additional cars that you only own for the purposes of renting out? Suddenly this is turned from like a passive income, I'm renting my car, to I'm self-employed and this is like a side business, and it becomes a problem. I'd say the same thing would be for Airbnb. Oh, I own a home, I'm renting out a room. Passive income, fine. Suddenly I'm buying rental properties, and then, I'm actively, renting out these things on Airbnb myself. Right now we're saying, oh, this is probably, self-employment. So now again, but there's another kind of way to get around that. And that's to say, well, what if I, sorry, here, I got to turn these lights off. Okay. So what if I do buy rental properties, but then I hire someone to management for me? Well, passive income, right? Because you're not there engaged in the day to day, right? It's just you happen to own this asset that's being managed by someone else. Same thing you see like with angel investors. What if I want to put some money into like my friend's business or this other business? Great, as long as you're, a passive owner, a passive investor, right? So that's what we're really looking at. Um, what about YouTube, right? Well, again, are you doing it for fun? Is it a hobby, or is your channel monetized? Again, if it's you're just doing it for fun, it's a non-monetized channel and it's a hobby, great, fun. Hobbies are allowed. But if your channel's monetized and you're actively working on it in the United States, that could be a problem, right? Oh, but what if I have a backlog of videos that are just there? So I'm not actually like doing anything new, but those backlog of videos are they are monetized and they're generating income. Well, again, that's passive income because you're not actively doing anything. Same thing would probably apply to OnlyFans, which is one that I've seen pop up more and more in terms of people asking questions. Same thing. If you're actively engaged on that platform while in the US, you're probably violating your status. Whereas if you sort of have a backlog of stuff that's already there before you even came to the US, or it's now common for people to hire someone to manage their OnlyFans for them. So again, we're talking about active versus passive. Get into crypto. Again, anytime you're talking about investing your own money, that's considered passive, and that's fine. So if you're playing the crypto market with your own money, you're using Robinhood or Webull or any of those like day trading apps. I mean, that's your own money, right? Obviously, if you somehow end up doing this for someone else and getting a cut, well, that would be considered active income and it's not allowed. Obviously, when we talk about spouses, it depends on their status, right? So H4s can't work unless you meet certain criteria and you're able to get an EAD. Those are mostly like Indian nationals that have an approved I-140 and are just waiting in the backlog. TDs also can't work, but E2 dependents, E1, E2 dependents can, work authorization is now automatically included. L2, so the door is open for them, right? So if you're an L2 spouse, you can do whatever you want, right? You have an open work permit. If you want to start your own business, do a YouTube channel, just go get a job, continue to work for your foreign employer, door's completely open to you. This would be L2s and then E spouses. But again, H4s without EAD or like TDs are kind of the big ones. It's like, what am I supposed to do? Sit around for years and not do anything? Unfortunately, that's kind of the reality that we exist in, where U.S. immigration law is extremely, extremely, extremely limiting. Where as the principal applicant, you pretty much come in and work for one employer, unless certain circumstances you can actually apply for a concurrent employer. TNs, Hs, you are actually allowed, if you go through the proper channels, to have more than one employer. But for the most part, man, you're pretty much limited to working for that employer and earning passive income. I mean, that is really it, right? And then again, when you're looking at spouses, you're pretty much looking at passive income unless you are in one of those categories that allows you to work. Again, I keep seeing this question come up. People try to be cute. Well, what if I work for a foreign employer and they pay me in foreign currency into my foreign bank account, right? Great, cool. Is USCIS likely to find out about it? And probably not. But guess what? If they do, it's still a violation. So if they do find out about it, again, one ways they can find out about this stuff is the tax man, right? If you're doing something on YouTube and they end up generating a 1099, right? Well, there's no way to get around that, right? YouTube reported that to the IRS. So when you file your taxes, you have to include it. And then if that gets back to USCIS, they're going to be like, well, what are these 1099s for? And again, you better be able to explain that they're related to passive income streams. Like again, if you're trading on Robinhood, for example, these days, right, you're going to get a tax form is going to be generated based on all of your trades because you're holding all of these stocks. If you're day trading, you're holding them for under a year. Again, that's still considered passive income because it's your own money. But just want to reiterate that, hey, I respect this. I respect the people that want the hustle, that want to earn more income. Unfortunately, in the vast majority of cases, you're not allowed unless you can classify it as a passive income stream. But hey, if you have any questions, right, as always, you can go to our website, schedule a consultation, hit us up on the social media. As always, download our app, Lawpilot Guardian, right? It is free on Android or iOS with a lot of useful features. We are always here to answer all of your questions. And hey, by the way, if you stay to the end of this video, we're going to throw out a free consultation to the person who can guess what my Reddit username is. Hey, if you can correctly guess what my Reddit username is, and you see me in there all day answering questions, as many questions as I can, we'll give you a free employment-based consultation. But until then, hey, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you guys next time.